A 15-year-old girl, shy and terrified of performing, facing a crowd of 200 critical adults, holding a broken microphone. There was no sign this story would end well, until she sang that first note. It was a hot September evening in 1954 at Club Manhattan, a living legend nestled in the heart of Memphis. Known as the city's most famous nightclub, this venue hosted some of music history's most important names every single night. The familiar mixture of jazz melodies rising through cigarette smoke, the crystal-clear clinking of bourbon glasses, the rich aroma of premium whiskey and intimate laughter created an atmosphere so distinctive it embodied the very soul of Memphis itself. But that evening, beneath those gleaming lights, not a single person sitting in that smoky room knew they were about to witness history in the making, about to see the birth of one of music's greatest legends. Just behind the stage, hidden behind Club Manhattan's characteristic red velvet curtains, 15-year-old Anna Mae Bullock's heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst from her chest. Her hands were shaking so violently she couldn't properly hold the microphone. Her throat was bone dry, her knees were weak, and her stomach was churning with anxiety. "I can't do this," she whispered to her mother, her voice barely audible above a whisper. "This is a huge mistake. Everyone's watching me and I'm just a little girl." Zelma Bullock gently placed her hand on her daughter's shoulder and gave her that warm, reassuring look that only mothers can give. "Anna Mae, my sweet child, you've been singing since the day you were born. Even before you learned to speak, you were humming melodies. In church, in our kitchen at home, in the cotton fields. This is no different. You're just going to share your voice with more people." But these people, Anna Mae's voice was trembling with fear. They're used to hearing real music. They listen to professional artists. I'm just an ordinary farm girl from Nutbush. What could I possibly offer them? At that moment, club owner Sam Phillips noticed the tension backstage and approached them. Sam was an experienced man who had worked in the music industry for over 30 years. He had discovered thousands of talents, but his instincts told him this girl was special. "Listen to me, child," he said, his voice both reassuring and determined. "If fate didn't want you here today, it wouldn't have brought you to this place. Take that microphone and just sing what comes from your heart. Music isn't about technical knowledge, it's about soul." Anna Mae's presence at Club Manhattan had begun as one of life's most beautiful coincidences. That week she had traveled from their farm in Nutbush to Memphis to visit her beloved Aunt Louise. Aunt Louise was her mother's youngest sister who worked as a nurse in the city. Friday evening, Louise had wanted to take her along to the grown-ups' entertainment with her close friend Betty. For 15-year-old Anna Mae, this was too early an age, but Aunt Louise had insisted, saying, "Sometimes in life opportunities come naturally, and we shouldn't miss them. More people need to hear this girl's voice," Louise had told her friend Betty that afternoon. "She's constantly singing at home." The neighbors stopped their work and opened their windows to listen. Just last week, Mr. Williams was coming back from the fields when he heard Anna Mae singing, and he stood at the door for 20 minutes just listening. When they entered Club Manhattan, Anna Mae was absolutely mesmerized. The brass instruments gleaming under stage lights, the musicians dressed in elegant tuxedos and gowns, the crystal chandeliers, the velvet armchairs, and that enchanting atmosphere oozing history from every corner. In their modest home in Nutbush, she had never seen such a place. This was a world where music lived and breathed. That evening, the Kings of Rhythm were on stage, one of Memphis's most beloved R&B groups. The band had been performing since the late 1940s and was highly respected in the region. However, that night, their lead vocalist Raymond Hill had been hospitalized with a serious throat infection. The doctor had ordered complete vocal rest. The group was hoping someone from the audience would come up to save the night and offer something to the disappointed customers. "Who's brave enough?" called out bass guitarist Willie Kizart, scanning the room with his eyes. "Who wants to sing a song with us? Let's not waste time, the night is long." The room had remained silent. The crowd of 200 people were looking at each other, but no one was stepping forward. Everyone had come to listen to music, not to perform. This kind of spontaneous situation required courage, and most people didn't possess that courage. At that crucial moment, Louise stood up decisively and pointed to Anna Mae. "This girl can sing," she said, her voice echoing throughout the room. "This girl has the voice of an angel." Anna Mae's world had turned upside down in an instant. All eyes had turned to her, and there was nowhere to run. "Aunt Louise, what are you doing?" she whispered in panic, her hands covered in cold sweat. "I can't sing in a place like this." "Trust me, sweetheart." Louise squeezed Anna Mae's hand while smiling. "Some moments come only once. This is your moment." Now waiting backstage, Anna Mae was reliving that fateful moment. Her heart was beating so fast she couldn't breathe. Her mouth was bone dry. The microphone was technically broken. There was a problem with the electrical connection. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. The stage lights kept flickering, the sound system was crackling, and worst of all, a room full of people was impatiently waiting for Anna Mae to take the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," announcer Bobby Blue Williams spoke into his microphone. "Tonight we have a truly special surprise for you. Memphis's shining young talent, Miss Anna Mae Bullock." Applause rose, but Anna Mae knew this was largely out of politeness and curiosity. People were being kind and wondering what this young girl would do. They weren't expecting a real performance. Perhaps they were expecting something fun and amateurish. When she gently parted the red curtain, 200 pairs of eyes were scrutinizing her. Different energies were coming from every corner of the room. The elderly gentlemen sitting in front were smoking their cigars. The young couples sitting in back were sipping their drinks. The middle-aged ladies sitting in the middle were whispering to each other, talking about who had what. Most continued their conversations, looking at Anna Mae with curiosity about who she was and where she came from. As she walked toward the stage, her feet felt like lead. Each step became more difficult. When the spotlights hit her face, her eyes were dazzled. When she reached the microphone, her hands were shaking so much she couldn't hold it steady. She was trying to plant her feet firmly on the ground, but her knees were still trembling. "Good evening," she said, her voice very weak and uncertain. The microphone wasn't working properly, and only those sitting in the first few rows could hear her. The room noise continued. The Kings of Rhythm's pianist Ike Turner began playing the melancholic intro to A Fool in Love. This was an R&B ballad in the style of Ray Charles that required a powerful vocal. Anna Mae took a deep breath, closed her eyes tightly, and tried to leave that momentary fear behind. In her mind, she visualized those calm, peaceful moments at home in Nutbush, singing beside her mother while cooking in the kitchen. And then she sang that magical first note. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly, as if a magic wand had touched it. Conversation suddenly stopped. Smokers forgot their cigarettes. Smoke hung suspended in the air. The clinking of glasses ceased. Even the waiters stopped moving. The power, raw energy, deep emotion, and pure talent that emerged from Anna Mae's voice was nothing anyone had expected. In this 15-year-old farm girl's voice, there was the wisdom of someone who seemed to have lived for decades, suffered pain, experienced love, endured losses. Her voice contained hope, struggle, resilience, and sharp, pure talent. In every note, there were traces of the folk songs she sang while working in the cotton fields. In every breath, the spirit of the spirituals she learned in the church choir echoed. In every word, the warmth of the lullaby melodies her mother sang to her could be felt. This wasn't just singing, this was a soul finding itself, a butterfly emerging from its cocoon. The salon's acoustics were perfect, and Anna Mae's voice reached every corner. The businessmen sitting in the back turned off their cell phones. The couples sitting at side tables held hands. The waiters standing at the bar stopped their work and started listening. This was one of those rare moments when time stops and only music exists. The microphone's technical problems didn't matter at all. Anna Mae's voice was so powerful, so rich, and so caring that it filled the room, echoed off the walls, and reached every corner. When the first verse ended, the room was completely silent. A very deep, sacred silence. It was as if everyone was holding their breath, not wanting to break the spell of this moment. As Anna Mae moved into the chorus, the confidence in her voice increased. She was no longer afraid. She had lost herself in the music, and in that state, the stage had become her natural habitat. People slowly began to stand up. First, elderly John Matthews sitting in the front row, then the young couple Mary and James Wilson sitting in the middle, then the group of friends sitting in the back. When Anna Mae opened her eyes, the entire room was on their feet. 200 people weren't just listening to her. They were feeling her, living with her, joining her on this musical journey. There was admiration, amazement, and deep respect in their eyes. In the middle of the song, Club Manhattan's owner Sam Phillips was standing by the stage, phone receiver in hand. He was excitedly calling a record company. His hands were trembling. "Jerry, listen to me," he whispered excitedly into the receiver. "Drop everything and get down here immediately. I've never seen anything like this in my life. I just discovered a diamond. A rough diamond, but a real diamond." The Kings of Rhythm's drummer Earl Palmer had been making music for 25 years. He had played with B.B. King, toured with Ray Charles, seen countless talents, but had never heard such natural talent in his life. While playing drums, he couldn't take his eyes off Anna Mae, playing his instrument almost on autopilot. In the corner of the room, music critic Robert Blues Johnson, an experienced journalist who wrote music reviews for the Memphis Commercial Appeal, had hastily pulled out his notebook and was writing rapidly. 15 years old. No formal vocal training, no stage experience, but that raw talent, that emotion, that natural stage presence. This girl won't just become a superstar someday, she'll become one in the near future. I'll never forget this night. As Anna Mae moved into the final section of the song, she had completely opened her voice, revealing her full potential. She was no longer the shy farm girl from Nutbush. On that stage, under those lights, at that microphone, she was in her true element. This was her world. When she sang the final note, that note hung in the air. The room remained completely silent. For 5 seconds, no one breathed. Then, like a dam bursting, thunderous applause and screams erupted. People were standing, clapping, whistling, shouting, "Encore, encore." Some were crying, others were just staring in shock. Anna Mae stood in the middle of the stage, in amazement and disbelief. What did this ovation mean? Was this reaction real? Had they really liked her, or were they just being polite? Sam Phillips stepped onto the stage, took the microphone, and spoke excitedly. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have just witnessed the birth of music history, the first breath of a new legend. Miss Anna Mae Bullock." The applause intensified and lasted even longer. Backstage, Aunt Louise was in tears, her hand on her heart, taking deep breaths. "I knew it," she kept repeating. "I always knew there was something special about that girl, but this was beyond anything I could have imagined." After that magical night, Anna Mae's life changed completely and permanently. Sam Phillips offered her regular, weekly performances at Club Manhattan, Wednesdays and Saturdays, he had said. $50 per week, plus your share of the tips. But with one condition: all school comes first. Sam was an experienced businessman and knew that young talents shouldn't neglect their education. Other clubs in the city began wanting her too. An offer came from Club Handy on Beale Street. Cotton Club called asking about her availability. Even calls started coming from Nashville. For Anna Mae, this situation was both exciting and overwhelming. Record company representatives began coming to Memphis to see her. An AANDR representative from Sun Records came and listened to her. The man from Atlantic Records said, "This girl has star quality, but it's still early." The representative from Chess Records left his card saying, "Let's talk in a few years." This intense interest both excited and frightened Anna Mae. She was only 15 years old, and the complexities of this big music world seemed overwhelming to her. With her mother's support and Sam Phillips's guidance, she was trying to keep her feet firmly planted on the ground. And most importantly, Anna Mae discovered the true power and potential of her own voice. But the biggest change was in Anna Mae's perception of herself. Before taking the stage that night, she saw herself as just an ordinary girl from Nutbush with no special qualities. When she left the stage, she had recognized the musician, artist, and performer within herself. This discovery also frightened her, because now she had responsibility. People expected things from her. She needed to make decisions about how to develop and use this talent. For a 15-year-old girl, this was a very heavy burden. She had asked her mother one day, "Mom, what if I can't succeed? What if that night was just a coincidence?" Zelma had answered her daughter, "Anna Mae, that night wasn't a coincidence. You've carried this talent since the day you were born. That night you just allowed the world to see it." The Kings of Rhythm's charismatic guitarist and leader Ike Turner approached Anna Mae that night. Ike was experienced in the music world. He had seen many talents, but he sensed something different in Anna Mae. "You're very special, girl," he said, his eyes determined and excited. "Would you like to work with me? I can open the doors of the music world for you, show you Nashville, New York." This offer surprised both Anna Mae and her family. Ike Turner was a recognized name and his offer needed to be taken seriously. But Anna Mae was still very young and wasn't sure if she could make such big decisions. "Let's not rush," her mother Zelma had said. Anna Mae should finish high school first. But Ike was insistent and impatient not to lose Anna Mae's potential. This offer would be the beginning of Anna Mae's transformation into her future Tina Turner identity. Of course, she wasn't aware of this at the time, but the course of her life had definitely changed that night. What happened after that night was also like a movie script. Memphis's local radio station WHBQ had to dedicate a special program to Anna Mae the next day because of listener calls from people who had heard her performance. The city's music stores were filled with customers asking for songs by this young girl who didn't have any recordings yet. The Memphis Commercial Appeal newspaper ran Robert Johnson's article as the headline, "A New Star is Born, Anna Mae Bullock." The article described that night at Club Manhattan in full detail and attracted great interest from the city's residents. But the most important change occurred within Anna Mae's own family. When she returned home to Nutbush, neighbors began to see her with different eyes. She was no longer just the youngest girl of the Bullock family, but the girl who sang in Memphis. This new identity was both exciting and frightening. Her mother Zelma was worried about her daughter's sudden change. "Anna Mae, you're still my little girl," she would say. "Don't let this fame go to your head." But it was also obvious that she was proud of her daughter. She told every neighbor, every acquaintance about that night, detailing how Anna Mae's voice had enchanted the room. Father Richard Bullock was more pragmatic. "Music is a nice hobby," he would say, "but school comes first." He was strongly against Anna Mae dropping out of her education. This situation led to long debates within the family. In the years that followed, Tina Turner became a worldwide icon and legend. But she never forgot that first night, that miraculous moment. That performance at Club Manhattan had become the foundation of her self-confidence and belief in her abilities. That night, she would say in an interview years later, her eyes sparkling, "I felt the true power of my voice for the first time in my life. I realized I wasn't just singing, I was touching people's souls, telling stories." From that moment on, music took on a different meaning for me. A 15-year-old shy girl, a child with stage fright, stepping onto that stage with a broken microphone in her hand. And she didn't just write a story, she wrote her own story, music's story, courage's story. Sometimes the greatest journeys begin with the smallest but bravest steps. For Anna Mae Bullock, that step was that first fearful but determined step from behind Club Manhattan's red curtains onto the stage. And the world met Tina Turner. If this incredible story moved you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who needs to hear about the power of believing in yourself. Ring that notification bell so you won't miss our upcoming stories about music history's greatest legends. Let us know in the comments which musician's story you'd like to hear next. We'll research it for you. Remember, every superstar was once a dreamer standing on the edge of their destiny. Just like young Anna Mae in that smoky club in Memphis, listening to her heart's voice and finding the courage to share it with the world.